believe.
We'll see.
He will meet a body. He hasn't found one yet.
It's not true. You don't believe it. Look at us. There's no good in us.
No! I believe in good!
There's no good in you.
No! 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 There we go. Give a round of applause.
Not only were you both on fire in that scene, but also Nicholas Parsons, who left us, unfortunately. Do you have any stories or memories of him that you could share with us today?
Yeah, well, he was just so delighted to be taken seriously, really, because he always was an actor before anything else, before Sale of the Century, before Just a Minute. He was an actor. That's how he trained, and so he was delighted to have been asked to do this part, and that's something that John Nathan Turner was very good at, was finding people, because Doctor Who wasn't, strange it may seem, it wasn't popular. It wasn't popular in those days. And he was always having to find ways of getting it in the press, ways of persuading the BBC that it still had legs, if you like. So one of the things was to cast people in unusual roles, and Nicholas Parsons was one of those people. And he was delighted, and he was just delightful to work with. And the scene in the pulpit, I don't know whether you remember that, where he has a little monologue, and he's so good in that. He's just really, really good. And then every time I've seen him since then, he's amazing. He had the memory of, just the most incredible memory. So the last time I saw him was last summer, when we were filming a documentary for the Blu-ray. And he was, 95 I think, and he'd hurt his back, so he was very cross with himself because he couldn't kind of move properly. But he was dressed immaculately, that's one thing about him. He was always just looked incredible. Had the most incredible skin you've ever seen. I mean, just like, still looked incredibly young. And first thing he says to me is, oh, hello Sophie, how's Vince and the boys? I mean, that's so incredible. And he really wanted my husband, who was a street performer before he was a presenter, he wanted him to go on his Edinburgh show with him, so he had plans to do that this summer. And then while I was doing the interview with him, I had this feeling, I was thinking, oh gosh, you have to make the most of these people while they're still around. And so I was aware that it was possibly the last time I'd see him, and that actually, on camera, so I was trying to ask him as many questions as possible. And then it turned out that he didn't live too far away from where I lived, so I asked if it was okay if I could get a lift back with him. So it was great. So and his driver took us both back. So I had the glorious experience of about 2 hours in the car with Nicholas Parsons, just talking to him about life and about his career, and it was just absolutely magical. So I'm very fortunate. I've got wonderful memories of him.
We can't really. Oh, something had to go wrong. So we can't really talk about the character of Ace without talking about feminism, and I guess there's a certain stereotype of the classic Doctor Who companion as this girl standing around screaming and saying, "What's that, Doctor?" But Ace is completely opposite of that. She's a complex female character. Before that was a buzz term. She's this kind of precursor to the Riot Girl movement, going around kicking stuff up and throwing drinks on snobby customers in Iceworld. How do you feel looking back on that one? Do you feel you've achieved something with that character?
Yeah, definitely. I was so delighted, because when I first got the part, I thought, this is a bit weird, because I was thinking of the typical Doctor Who companion who runs around in completely unsuitable footwear, you know, high heels, and of course they're going to twist their ankles, you know, and being a bit helpless. And I thought, that's weird, because that's not me, you know, that's not. And also the part that I'd auditioned for, which was Ray in Delta and the Bannermen, I had to ride a motorbike, and I thought, well, yeah, I can see that. But then I was thinking, this is strange, what's going on? And then I got the script when through the door for Dragonfire, and it kind of all made sense, and I went, okay, fine, yes, this is a bit of me. And my mum said she recognised quite a lot of it from my teenage years, particularly the eye rolling and the kind of tutting and the shouting, you know, like that bit. But I think the proof is in the pudding, really, and I think that the number of women who've come up to me subsequently over the years and have said that Ace was such an important part of their growing up and their childhood. Because don't forget, this is what, 32 years ago now, and 3 maybe, and there wasn't really any other similar character on TV. There really wasn't. It wasn't like now, where, thank goodness, you have a lot of young female strong characters on TV, but in those days, this was pre-Buffy, it was pre-everything really, and so she really made quite a mark in that time, and I was honoured to play her, basically.
So, was it a conscious decision, do you think, to have like more interesting female roles in general? Like you had the cannibal elderly ladies and the happiness control, obviously. Was that something we were trying to push for?
The cannibal elder lady was in Paradise Tower, let me correct you, it was Bonnie Langsford. See, I know my stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was down to Andrew Cartmel, the script editor, because he came in, a young guy, Canadian guy, who didn't really know too much about the history of Doctor Who, which I think was quite helpful in a way, and he saw this kind of gap, and he was interested in the storytelling, really, and he really, yeah, I mean, it was amazing, really. He was so different to John Nathan Turner. John Nathan Turner was a brilliant producer, just knew exactly how to get the press interested, as I was saying before, knew how to play the BBC and stayed there beyond his time, just simply to have the show be on TV still. But what Andrew brought was this kind of updating of attitudes, I think, in Doctor Who. And if you look back, Doctor Who's always been at the forefront of that, right from the beginning, you know, new ideas, new technology. You can look back now and go, oh, look at that special effect. But I mean, you know, really, at the time, it was always the kind of cutting edge, really. And when Doctor Who first started in 1963, it was something completely new. So I think this is another, yeah, it's due to Andrew, I think, and John realising that this would be a good way, a good relationship for the Doctor to have.
Was there kind of
Not my day today. Was there kind of a gender queer idea behind your character slightly as well? I think you dressed in drag. Well, somebody will tell me. Ghost light. Was it Ghost light? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's very interesting looking back, isn't it? Because I mean, us golden oldies who were around at the time, it was like there wasn't any of that. And I mean, you know, I'm delighted that it's sort of with hindsight that's what, you know, for example, Rona Munro in Survival. I had no idea that she'd written the character of Kara as a possible, you know, relationship. She knew she'd done that, because you must remember that 33 years ago, this was not on the agenda at the BBC. you know, LGBTQ, not a thing at all. And it was very, very different times. And I'm delighted that we got that in. But it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't a conscious thing at the time. But I'm very pleased in hindsight.
Can we talk about The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, one of my favourite stories from your era? It's mad, isn't it? Giant buried robots, these terrifying clowns, psychic circus, gods of Ragnarok. But then at the end of
Peggy Mount with squishy fruit.
and the main baddies being this middle class family eating crisps. Was an element of satire to that? What do you think was the thinking behind that story?
It's a brilliant story. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. It's at the time it was like, oh, what? But actually, I think it's with time, it's an amazing one. To be honest, we didn't really think too much about it. We didn't have time for a programme that was about a Time Lord and time. We never had enough time. So we were really literally getting the script, okay, right, read through, blah, 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 put it on, da da da. And also we were coping with, at the time, strikes at the BBC, so people were down tools, and then The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, we didn't actually know whether we were going to complete the making of it, because we'd done the location stuff down in the ubiquitous quarry in Warmwell in Dorset, which was doubling as Alien Planet, as ever. We'd done all that, and then we got back to the studio, and then they discovered asbestos in the studio at TV Centre. So everything was cancelled. All the filming in every studio at TV Centre was cancelled, including the rest of the scenes, half the story of Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And it's only due to John Nathan Turner's tenacity that it actually got completed. And it was, I can't remember the exact story, but I think the designer, a phone call came through when the designer was having a meeting with John Nathan Turner, and somebody said, what about using the car park at the Elstree Studios? And they thought, well, yeah, and the designer said, yeah, well, it is set in a tent, so we could just put a tent up. It might just work. And sure enough, it did. It was very difficult to film there, because there were light aircraft going over, giving people sort of bird's eye view of the EastEnders lot. And so every time, of course, the plane goes over, you have to stop shooting. They didn't make any concession to stopping the beer lorries delivering the beer to the bar at the Elstree Studios, because they knew there'd be riots if the beer ran out. But we somehow managed to complete the story, and that was it. We didn't really ever have time to think about, oh, how is this going to look in 30 years' time or whatever, or what's this an allegory of? With the exception of the Happiness Patrol, which we realised very quickly was may have had something to do with the government at the time.
So I saw an interview with Kate O'Mara where they hung her upside down for so long that she burst a blood vessel in her alcohol. She was in Dynasty, I'd say. Did they ever do anything to you that was quite so horrific?
Well, I was just talking, wasn't I, about the water tank incident. Yeah, the infamous water tank incident. So basically, it was the end of a long filming day. In those days, you had to finish at 10 o'clock, otherwise the crew would charge, you know, overtime, and there wasn't enough budget for that. So this was Battlefield, and the end of the episode was me in water rising, typical companion ending, and mild peril, or in this case it was proper peril. I rushed over to get in this tank. The visual effects guys lowered me down. They started pumping water into the tank, which thankfully was warm. They used to just like throwing me in cold water, but this time it was nice and warm. And as it filled up, Sylvester was standing outside the tank, realised that I couldn't hear anything. The director came down from the gallery because I couldn't hear anything, and we were just doing the shots where I'm going, "Doctor, doctor," and Sylvester sort of, he was doing hand signals to me. Yeah, okay, yeah, it was quite pleasant actually. Nice bit of a bath at the end of the day. And then all of a sudden I was steadying my hands on the front of the tank, and I just felt this under my hand, and I realised that that was not meant to happen. And instinctively I just put my arms up like that, and Sylvester shouted, he could see it happen at the top of his voice, he just shouted, "Get her out of there!" And Sylvester's voice is not quiet. And the visual effects guys were alerted to pull me up out of the tank, and as I came out, it was bizarre, I could see the front of the tank just bulging out, the glass, and just splitting, and gallons and gallons of water just pouring all over the studio floor. And then Sylvester, of course, realised that water and electricity don't go so well together, and of course all these cables and the cameras and everything all over the floor. So he shouted, "Turn off the electricity!" And so he was a real hero. And I escaped with, I had tiny sort of little bits of glass, but it didn't cut or anything in my hand. And I didn't think anything of it at all. It was funny, it was just like, oh well, nothing happened. So I forgot to tell anyone really, my close family and even my agent, and a few days later my agent said, "What's all this? We got the tabloids ringing up! Why, we were nearly killed, what's going on?" And then we were filming something else down on location, and my dad, because we had no mobiles in those days, and so somehow a message had got through from my dad saying, "Is my daughter all right?" Because apparently there'd been a thing in the News of the World which said, "Doctor Who girl cheats death," as they do. And somebody had rung my dad up and said, "Did you know your daughter was involved in a serious accident?" And my poor dad was like, "Oh my God, where is she?" But I'd sort of forgotten about it. And then a film came out many years later called The Prestige. I don't know if anyone saw that, about magicians. Brilliant film. And in about the first 10 minutes, there's a scene where the magician's assistant is put into a tank of water, and she's tied up and she has to escape, and she can't, it's like a Houdini thing, but she doesn't escape, so they smash the tank with axes. And it was so bizarre. As I was watching this scene, I just started to shake from head to foot. And it was amazing. It was like delayed shots from years and years and years ago. It's so bizarre. I mean, how incredible are our bodies that we we hold information like that in our cells. Anyway, I'm all right now.
Yeah, on the subject of effects, like when you watch the new Doctor Who today, obviously they're very, they make it look easy, all these CGI spaceships. When you were filming, how was it working with all the practical effects, the very early days of CGI? Were there any occasions where you were worried whether, what will this look like when it's on TV?
I think we just trusted the visual effects people completely. The visual effects on set were things like the explosions and the little sort of things that went off here and there, and everything else was done afterwards. So like I'm thinking one springs to mind, which was the transmat in Remembrance of the Daleks, where the Dalek kind of comes through. And I don't know, I think being an actor, you're sort of in the world of imagination anyway. You know what it's like when you're a kid and you're imagining, and you're playing at whatever it might be, cowboys and Indians or Daleks and things. So you just get used to it. It's kind of part of the job, and it does.